Sir,
She held a dying stranger's hand in the rain, watching his last breath fog the air between them. She didn't know that a single act of mercy would bring a billionaire to her diner door, or that he'd carry the weight of a grief so heavy, it might bury them both. The rain that night wasn't romantic. It was the kind of rain that soaked through cheap shoes and made Clara Hayes question every life choice that had led her to this moment, 28 years old, smelling like French fry grease, walking home from a 10-hour shift with $32 in tips and a religious pamphlet someone had left instead of a 20. Jesus loves you, the pamphlet proclaimed. Clara stuffed it in her apron pocket. If Jesus loved her, he had a funny way of showing it. Rosie's Diner sat on the edge of Route 66, the kind of place where truckers stopped for weak coffee and weaker conversation. Clara had worked there for 6 years, long enough to memorize every crack in the linoleum, every flicker of the neon sign that buzzed open in angry red letters. Long enough to perfect the art of smiling at men who looked at her like she was part of the menu. Tonight had been particularly brutal. A bachelorette party had commandeered 3 booths, ordered everything with modifications, and left Clara a pamphlet and some loose change. The toilet had backed up, spectacularly. And Tommy, the cook, had spent the entire shift complaining about his ex-wife, as if Clara didn't have enough depressing narratives in her own head. If you've been hooked up to this moment, please consider subscribing. Your support helps us breathe life into stories that were never meant to stay silent. Thank you for being part of this journey. Now, let's dive back into the story. The rain fell harder. Clara's umbrella had broken 2 weeks ago, and buying a new one felt like an extravagance she couldn't afford. Her mother's medical bills, even 3 years after her death, still arrived with the regularity of clockwork, each one a reminder that grief came with interest rates. She was halfway to the bus stop when she saw him. The old man lay crumpled near the bench, his expensive suit doing absolutely nothing against the cold. His silver hair was plastered to his skull, rain pooling in the hollow of his throat. Most people would have walked past. This was Route 66, after all, a place where minding your business was practically a survival skill. But Clara's mother had cursed her with an inconvenient conscience. "Sir." She knelt beside him, rain immediately soaking through the knees of her uniform. "Sir, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open, pale blue, startlingly alert despite his condition. I think I'm dying, miss." "Well, that's dramatic," Clara muttered, already fumbling for her phone. "You're not dying on my watch. I've had a terrible night, and a corpse would really be the cherry on top of this disaster Sunday." He smiled, actually smiled. "You're funny." "Yeah, I'm hilarious. A regular comedian. Now stay with me." She dialed 911, her fingers numb. The operator's voice was mechanical, promising an ambulance in 20 minutes. 20 minutes felt like forever when someone was dying in front of you. Clara made a decision that would change everything. She hooked her arms under his shoulders and dragged him toward the diner. What would you do if you found a stranger dying in the rain? Would you stop, or would you keep walking? Drop your thoughts below. Getting a dying man into a diner was significantly harder than Clara had anticipated. He was heavier than he looked, and her arms, strong from years of carrying industrial ketchup bottles and trays loaded with greasy plates, still trembled with the effort. The bell above the door chimed as she shouldered it open. Tommy looked up from the grill, his expression shifting from annoyance to alarm. "Jesus, Clara, what the—" "Call 911 again," she barked, dragging the old man toward the nearest booth. "Tell them to hurry." She wrapped him in every clean towel she could find, her hands moving on autopilot. His breathing was shallow, each inhale a wet rattle that made her stomach clench. She'd heard that sound before, in the hospital room where her mother had spent her final weeks, hooked up to machines that beeped out the rhythm of a life ending. "Stay with me," Clara whispered, pressing a towel to his forehead. His skin was ice cold, his lips tinged blue. "Come on, don't you dare die in my diner. Health inspectors are already on my ass." He laughed, a weak, wheezing sound. "What's your name?" "Clara." Clara Hayes. She didn't know why she told him. Maybe because he was dying, and dying people deserve to know the name of the person holding their hand. "What's yours?" "Thomas." His fingers fumbled in his jacket pocket, trembling. "Thomas Whitmore Sr." He pulled out a business card, soggy and bent, and pressed it into her palm with surprising strength. Clara glanced at it. "Thomas Whitmore Jr., CEO, Whitmore Technologies." Below the name was an address in Manhattan and a phone number that probably connected directly to someone important. "My son," Thomas whispered. "Tell him." "You'll tell him yourself," Clara insisted, but her voice cracked. She'd said the same thing to her mother once, promising her that she'd get better, that they'd go to the beach like they'd planned. Her mother had died 2 days later. Thomas squeezed her hand. His grip was weak, but his eyes, those pale blue eyes, held hers with an intensity that made her chest ache. "Thank you," he said. "For seeing me. Most people, they just walk past. Most people are idiots," Clara said softly. "You're kind." His voice was fading now, each word an effort. Don't let the world make you less kind." Clara blinked back tears. She didn't cry anymore, not since the funeral, not since she'd learned that tears didn't pay bills or fill empty spaces. But something about this stranger, dying in her diner, holding her hand like she was someone who mattered, it cracked something open inside her. The ambulance lights painted the windows red and blue. The paramedics rushed in with practiced efficiency, their voices clipped and professional. Clara stepped back, still holding the soggy business card, watching as they loaded Thomas onto a gurney. "Is he going to be okay?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. The paramedic, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, shook her head. His heart gave out. "We'll do what we can, but..." Thomas died before they reached the hospital. Clara learned this later, from a brief phone call that felt too impersonal for what had just happened. She stood in the rain afterward, the business card clutched in her fist, feeling like she'd lost someone she'd known forever instead of 20 minutes. She went home, cried in the shower until the water ran cold, and told herself that would be the end of it. Life, after all, didn't hand out second chances to waitresses who smelled like grease and regret. Clara woke up the next morning feeling like she'd been hit by a truck. Her body ached from hauling Thomas into the diner, and her mind kept replaying his final words, "Don't let the world make you less kind." Easy for a dying man to say. Kindness didn't pay rent. She dragged herself out of bed, pulled on her uniform, the same one from last night, because she only owned 2 and the other was in the wash, and headed to the diner. The sky was gray, the kind of oppressive gray that promised more rain. Perfect. Rosie's was already buzzing when she arrived. Tommy was at the grill, flipping pancakes with the enthusiasm of a man attending his own funeral. The morning regulars occupied their usual spots, old Pete in the corner booth, nursing his coffee like it was liquid salvation, and the Henderson twins arguing over a crossword puzzle. "You okay?" Tommy asked, not looking up from the griddle. "Peachy," Clara lied. She tied her apron, grabbed the coffee pot, and began her rounds. Smile. Pour. Smile. Pour. The rhythm was numbing, familiar, safe. She was refilling Pete's cup when the bell above the door chimed. Clara glanced up, and froze. The man who walked in didn't belong in Rosie's diner. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Clara made in 6 months, his shoes so polished they reflected the fluorescent lights. His face was angular, handsome in that sharp-edged way that spoke of expensive grooming and minimal sleep. Dark hair, darker eyes, and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else. Behind him, through the window, Clara could see a sleek black car idling at the curb. A driver sat behind the wheel, stiff and professional. The diner went quiet. Even the Henderson twins stopped arguing. The man's gaze swept the room, clinical and assessing, before landing on Clara. Recognition flickered across his face, not of her, exactly, but of something. He walked toward her with the kind of confidence that came from never being told no. Clara Hayes. His voice was low, controlled, with the faintest hint of exhaustion beneath it. Clara's grip tightened on the coffee pot. Who's asking? He reached into his jacket, Clara tensed, and pulled out a business card. The same card she'd received last night, except this one was crisp and dry. My name is Thomas Whitmore Jr., he said. I believe you were with my father when he died. The coffee pot suddenly felt very heavy. Clara set it down carefully, aware that everyone in the diner was now openly staring. Tommy had abandoned the grill entirely. I'm so sorry for your loss, Clara said automatically, because that's what you said when someone's father died. Even if that someone looked like he'd stepped out of a Forbes magazine. Thomas's jaw tightened. I need to speak with you. Privately. I'm working. I'll make it worth your time. There was something in his tone, not quite desperation, but close. Clara glanced at Tommy, who shrugged, and then at old Pete, who was watching with the rapt attention of someone who just discovered cable television. Fine, Clara said. But I only get 15 minutes for break, and I'm not leaving the diner. Thomas nodded once, sharp and businesslike. That's all I need. Clara grabbed 2 mugs, poured coffee she suspected he wouldn't drink, and led him to the booth in the corner, the same booth where his father had died just hours ago. Neither of them noticed the towels were still folded on the seat. Thomas Whitmore Jr. sat across from Clara like he was negotiating a hostile takeover. His posture was perfect, his expression unreadable, his hands folded on the table with the precision of someone who'd been trained never to fidget. Clara, by contrast, slouched against the vinyl booth and wrapped her hands around her coffee mug. She was too tired for whatever this was. My father died alone, Thomas said finally. On a street corner. In the rain. Like he was nobody. Clara bristled. He wasn't alone. I was with him. You're right. Thomas's gaze softened, just barely. And that's why I'm here. The paramedics told me what you did. How you brought him inside, stayed with him, called for help. He paused, his jaw working. You didn't have to do that. He was dying. What was I supposed to do, step over him? Most people would have. Clara shrugged. Then most people suck. A ghost of a smile flickered across Thomas's face, there and gone so quickly Clara almost missed it. He reached into his jacket again, this time pulling out a leather checkbook that probably cost more than Clara's car. If she'd had a car. I'd like to repay you for your kindness, he said, clicking open an expensive pen. Name your price. Clara stared at him. Excuse me. Whatever you want. Medical bills, rent, student loans, I can make it disappear. He poised the pen over the checkbook, waiting. How much do you need? The words hit Clara like a slap. She set down her coffee mug with enough force to make the liquid slosh. You think I helped your father so I could shake you down for money? That's not what I... Because if that's what you think, you can take your checkbook and shove it straight up your... Clara. Tommy's voice cut through her anger. He was standing by the register, his expression somewhere between amused and worried. The entire diner was still watching. Clara took a breath. Then another. Her mother's voice echoed in her head, count to 10 before you say something you'll regret, baby girl. She only made it to 5. I helped your father because he was a human being who needed help, Clara said, her voice low and dangerous. Not because I wanted a reward. Not because I thought his rich son would show up and throw money at me like I'm some charity case. She leaned forward. Your father spent his last minutes on earth being kind to a stranger. Maybe you should try it sometime. Thomas's expression shuddered completely. He snapped the checkbook closed and stood, his movements stiff. I apologize. I didn't mean to offend you. Well, you did. He hesitated, and for just a moment, Clara saw something crack in that perfect facade, grief, maybe, or exhaustion, or something else she couldn't name. His eyes were the same pale blue as his father's, she realized. But where Thomas Sr.'s had been warm, Thomas Jr.'s were glacial. My father was a good man, Thomas said quietly. Better than I ever gave him credit for. And in his last moments, a complete stranger showed him more compassion than his own son did in years. His voice roughened. So forgive me if I don't know how to process that, Miss Hayes. He turned to leave, his shoulders rigid with something that looked like shame. Wait, Clara heard herself say. Thomas stopped, his hand on the door. Clara didn't know why she was stopping him. Didn't know what she was going to say. But something about the way he stood there, alone, expensive, and utterly lost, reminded her of his father lying in the rain. He talked about you, she said. At the end. He wanted you to know. Don't. Thomas's voice was sharp. Please. And then he was gone. Thomas didn't come back the next day. Or the day after that. Clara told herself she was relieved. The man was clearly carrying around enough emotional baggage to sink a cruise ship, and she had her own problems. Like the fact that her landlord had slipped an eviction notice under her door, politely informing her that she had 30 days to come up with 3 months back rent or find somewhere else to live. She stared at the notice while eating cereal for dinner, again, and did the math in her head. Even if she picked up every extra shift Tommy would give her, even if she survived entirely on diner leftovers, she'd still come up short by at least $800. She thought about Thomas's checkbook. About how easy it would have been to just say yes, to let him pay off her debts and absolve whatever guilt he was carrying around. But the thought made her stomach turn. She'd watched her mother work herself to death trying to maintain dignity in a world designed to strip it away. Clara would be damned if she'd throw that away for a billionaire's guilty conscience. On the third day, Thomas came back. He walked in during the lunch rush, looking somehow more exhausted than before. The suit was different, navy instead of charcoal, but the shadows under his eyes were darker. He took the same corner booth without asking, folding himself into the space like he belonged there. Clara grabbed the coffee pot and approached warily. We don't take reservations. I'm not here to offer you money, Thomas said. Good. Because I'm not here to take it. I'd like a cup of coffee. And. He hesitated, his fingers drumming once against the table before he caught himself. And to apologize. Properly, this time. Clara studied him. There was something different about him today, the armor was still there, but it had cracks. She poured the coffee, then surprised herself by sliding into the booth across from him. You get 5 minutes, she said. Then I have to get back to work. Thomas wrapped his hands around the mug but didn't drink. My father and I hadn't spoken in 2 years. We had a falling out. Over the business, over how I was running my life, over everything, really. His jaw tightened. He wanted me to slow down, to find balance, to stop treating people like transactions. I told him he was old-fashioned. That the world had changed. Clara said nothing. Sometimes people didn't need advice, they just needed someone to listen. He called me the night he died, Thomas continued, his voice hollow. I was in a board meeting. I sent it to voicemail. He finally looked up, meeting her eyes. He was on his way to see me. To try one more time. And I couldn't be bothered to pick up the phone. You didn't know, Clara said quietly. That doesn't make it better. He took a breath. When I heard what you did, how you stopped, how you stayed, I couldn't understand it. You didn't know him. He was nothing to you. And yet you treated him with more humanity than I'd shown him in years. So you tried to pay me off. A bitter smile twisted his mouth. I tried to make it transactional. Because that's all I know how to do. Turn everything into a deal, a negotiation, something I can control. He met her eyes again. But kindness isn't transactional, is it? No, Clara said. It's not. They sat in silence for a moment. The diner buzzed around them, the clatter of plates, Tommy shouting orders, the Henderson twins arguing over the check. Normal life, continuing as if the world hadn't shifted slightly on its axis. He told me not to let the world make me less kind, Clara said. Your father, I mean. Those were his last words to me. Thomas's throat worked. That sounds like him. He was proud of you, you know. Even dying, even with everything, when he talked about you, I could hear it in his voice. Don't. But this time the word wasn't sharp, it was broken. Clara stood, giving him space to pull himself together. Coffee's on the house. The therapy session, though, that'll cost you. He looked up, startled, and she was surprised to see his eyes were wet. How much? Come back tomorrow. Same time. And maybe try ordering some actual food. You look like you haven't eaten in a week. Have you ever regretted not answering a call from someone you loved? Sometimes the moments we avoid become the ones we'd give anything to have back. What do you think Thomas should do now? Something shifted in Thomas's expression, not quite a smile, but close. Is that your professional opinion, Miss Hayes? It's Clara. And yes. She refilled his mug. Also, for what it's worth, your father forgave you. I could tell. How? Because he spent his last breath telling me not to lose my kindness. Not cursing you, not being angry. Just hoping the world would be gentler to a stranger. Clara picked up the coffee pot. That's not something an angry man does. That's something a father does. She left him sitting there, staring into his coffee like it held answers. He came back the next day. And the day after that. By the end of the week, Thomas Whitmore Jr. had become a fixture at Rosie's diner. He arrived every day at 2 p.m., during the lull between lunch and dinner, and took the same corner booth. He ordered coffee, black, no sugar, and whatever Clara recommended from the menu. On Tuesday, it was meatloaf. Wednesday, Tommy's world-famous chili that was famous to absolutely nobody. Thursday, a patty melt that Thomas ate with the focused intensity of someone who'd forgotten food could taste like something other than fuel. Clara watched this ritual with a mixture of amusement and concern. The man was a billionaire CEO. Surely he had better things to do than eat mediocre diner food and nurse lukewarm coffee. He's got it bad, Tommy said on Friday, flipping burgers with unnecessary enthusiasm. Got what bad? Clara was wiping down the counter, preparing for the dinner rush. For you, obviously. Clara's hand stilled. Don't be ridiculous. He's grieving. I'm just. I don't know. A neutral person he can sit with. Aha. Tommy's grin was infuriating. That's why he tips you $50 for a $7 meal. He what? Check your apron pocket, genius. Clara did. Folded neatly among the receipt papers was a crisp $50 bill. She marched over to Thomas's booth, the bill clutched in her fist. I told you I don't want your money, she said, slapping it on the table. Thomas looked up from his phone, startled. It's a tip. It's excessive. The service was exceptional. I poured coffee and brought you a plate. A trained monkey could do that. Then consider it a donation to the Keep Clara from Getting Evicted fund. His expression was infuriatingly calm. I heard you talking to your landlord on the phone yesterday. You're 3 months behind. Clara's face burned. You were eavesdropping. You were talking 3 feet away from me. That doesn't give you the right to. Clara. His voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. Let me help. Please. Why? The word came out sharper than she intended. Why do you care? You didn't even know your father was dying until it was too late, and now you're what, trying to save me to make yourself feel better about it." The booth went silent. Clara immediately regretted the words, but they were out now, hanging in the air like smoke. Thomas's face went blank, that careful mask sliding back into place. "You're right," he said quietly. "I apologize for overstepping." He stood, pulling out his wallet. Clara watched as he placed exact change on the table, no tip this time, and walked toward the door. She should have let him leave. Should have gone back to work, grateful to have maintained her boundaries. But her mother's voice whispered in her head again, "Being right isn't the same as being kind, baby girl." "Thomas, wait." He paused, hand on the door, but didn't turn around. Clara crossed the diner, aware that old Pete and the Henderson twins were watching with the rapt attention of soap opera enthusiasts. "I'm sorry. That was cruel." It was honest. His voice was tight. Honest and cruel aren't mutually exclusive. She stepped around to face him. "Look, I know you're trying to help. And maybe part of you is trying to make up for your father. But I'm not a project you can fix, okay? I'm just a person trying to get by. I know that. Do you?" Clara crossed her arms. "Because from where I'm standing, it feels like you're treating me the same way you treat everything else, like a problem that can be solved with money." Thomas's jaw worked. For a long moment, he just looked at her, really looked at her, like he was seeing her for the first time. "You're right," he said finally. "I've spent so long reducing everything to transactions that I've forgotten how to just be with someone. Without an agenda." "So what's your agenda with me?" "I don't know." The admission seemed to cost him something. "At first, I thought I owed you. For being there when I wasn't. But now." He trailed off, shaking his head. "Now I think I keep coming back because you're the only person who talks to me like I'm human. Not a bank account, not a business opportunity. Just Thomas." Clara felt something in her chest loosen. "That's because you are human. Despite your best efforts to convince me otherwise." A real smile, small, but genuine, flickered across his face. "Does this mean I can come back tomorrow?" "Only if you promise to stop leaving ridiculous tips." "I'll try. And maybe." Clara hesitated. "Maybe we could try being friends. Real friends. The kind who don't keep score." Thomas extended his hand, formal and a little awkward. "Friends." Clara shook it, ignoring the flutter in her stomach when his hand closed around hers. "Friends." He came back the next day. But this time, when Clara sat down across from him during her break, it felt less like therapy and more like something else entirely. Something that scared her more than eviction notices ever could. 3 weeks into their strange friendship, Thomas asked Clara to dinner. Like, dinner. Clara was refilling salt shakers, a task that required exactly 0 brain cells and gave her an excuse to avoid eye contact. Like dinner at a restaurant. One that doesn't serve everything on a plate that's been microwaved. Thomas was nursing his usual coffee, watching her with that intensity that made her nervous. "Unless you're afraid I'll try to pay for it." "You will try to pay for it. It's dinner, Clara. Not a hostile takeover." She wanted to say no. Every instinct screamed at her to maintain the careful distance they'd established, the safe space of the diner, the neutral territory where she controlled the narrative. But something in his expression stopped her. He looked hopeful and terrified in equal measure, like a man standing at the edge of a cliff, unsure whether he was about to fly or fall. "Fine," she heard herself say. "But nowhere fancy. I don't own anything that doesn't smell like French fries." They went to an Italian place on the edge of town, family-owned, red checkered tablecloths, the kind of restaurant where the owner's grandmother was probably in the kitchen personally insulting the marinara sauce. It was perfect. Thomas looked hilariously out of place in his tailored suit, but he relaxed as the evening went on. They talked about everything and nothing, her mother's terrible taste in romantic comedies, his father's obsession with model trains, the particular hell of customer service jobs, the loneliness of boardrooms. "I thought money would make me happy," Thomas admitted, twirling pasta on his fork with the concentration of someone who'd learned to eat at business dinners, not family tables. "My father tried to tell me it wouldn't. Said I was chasing the wrong things." "Were you?" "Yes." He met her eyes. "I built an empire, Clara. Whitmore Technologies is worth billions. I can buy almost anything I want. And I've never been more miserable in my life." Clara sipped her wine, cheap Chianti that somehow tasted better than anything she'd had in years. "So what do you want?" "Really?" Thomas set down his fork. "I want to wake up and not feel like I'm suffocating. I want to have a conversation that isn't about quarterly projections or stock prices. I want—" He paused, something vulnerable flickering across his face. "I want what my father had. That ability to see people, really see them, and make them feel like they matter. You're doing better than you think." "Am I?" His smile was self-deprecating. "I'm a 36-year-old man who has to schedule friendships like board meetings. You scheduled this dinner." "Exactly my point." Clara laughed, surprising herself. "Okay, so you're a work in progress. Join the club. We meet on Tuesdays and serve terrible coffee." The dinner stretched into hours. They closed down the restaurant, the owner practically shooing them out with a knowing smile. Thomas drove her home, not in the town car with the driver, but in his personal vehicle, a sleek Tesla that probably cost more than Clara would make in a decade. He walked her to her door, hands in his pockets, looking for all the world like a nervous teenager. "Thank you for tonight," he said. "For giving me a chance. Thank you for the carbs." Clara fumbled with her keys, suddenly aware of how close they were standing. "We should do it again sometime." "Tomorrow?" That's a little eager. "I'm a work in progress, remember?" His smile was soft, genuine. "I'm learning not to schedule everything." Clara opened her mouth to respond, and that's when her world exploded. The door to her apartment flew open, crashing against the wall. A man stumbled out, tall, wiry, with the jittery movements of someone who'd been using. Clara's stomach dropped. "Where the hell have you been?" Her brother, Julian, grabbed her arm, his grip too tight. "I've been calling you for hours." "Julian, let go. You think you're too good for me now? Won't return my calls, won't lend me money." His eyes were wild, unfocused. Then he noticed Thomas. "Oh, I see. Found yourself a sugar daddy." Thomas stepped forward, his entire demeanor shifting. "Take your hand off her." "Or what?" Julian laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You'll throw money at me? That's what you people do, right?" "Julian, please." Clara tried to pull away, mortified. "You're high. Go sleep it off." "I need $500, Clara. Just 500, and I'll leave you alone." "I don't have it." "Liar." He shoved her, hard. Clara stumbled backward, straight into Thomas, who caught her with one arm while his other hand connected with Julian's jaw. The punch was precise, controlled, and absolutely devastating. Julian went down like a puppet with cut strings. "If you ever touch her again," Thomas said, his voice cold enough to freeze blood, "I will make you disappear. Do you understand?" Julian scrambled backward, then ran. Clara stood there, shaking, her carefully constructed world crumbling around her. Thomas turned to her, and she saw the moment his anger shifted to concern. "Clara. I need you to leave." Her voice sounded strange, distant. "Let me help." "I said leave. What would you do if someone you cared about saw the worst part of your life? Would you let them help, or push them away? Share your thoughts below." He left. Clara went inside, locked the door, and cried until dawn. Thomas showed up at the diner the next day anyway. Clara pretended not to see him. She took orders, poured coffee, smiled at customers with a brightness that felt like shattered glass. Her right wrist ached where Julian had grabbed her, already bruising purple beneath her long sleeves. Thomas sat in his usual booth, untouched coffee growing cold in front of him. Watching. Waiting. "You're going to have to talk to him eventually," Tommy said, scraping the grill with more force than necessary. "He's been sitting there for 3 hours. Then he can sit for 3 more. Clara." "I don't want to hear it, Tommy." But when her shift ended and she untied her apron with trembling fingers, Thomas was standing by the door. He'd positioned himself between her and the exit, not threatening, just there. Immovable. "I'm not leaving until you talk to me," he said quietly. "There's nothing to talk about. Your brother is a drug addict who gets violent when he's using. You're covering bruises on your wrist. And you won't let anyone help you." His voice was gentle, but his eyes were steel. "That's plenty to talk about." Clara's composure cracked. "You don't know anything about my life. Then tell me. Why? So you can fix it. Save the poor broken waitress and feel good about yourself." The words were venom, designed to hurt. "I don't need saving, Thomas. I need you to mind your own business." He didn't flinch. "You're right. I can't fix this. I can't make your brother stop using, can't erase whatever history you two have. But I can stand here and refuse to let you face it alone. I've been alone for 3 years. I'm fine. You're not fine, Clara. And that's okay." Something in her broke. Maybe it was exhaustion, or the bruise throbbing on her wrist, or the way Thomas looked at her, not with pity, but with something that felt dangerously close to understanding. She sank into the nearest booth, and he sat across from her, close enough to touch but giving her space. "Julian was the golden child," Clara said finally, her voice hollow. "Smart, athletic, charming. My mother adored him. Then he got injured playing football senior year, got hooked on pain pills, and—" She gestured vaguely. "You know how that story ends. And you tried to save him." "Of course I did. He's my brother." Clara's laugh was bitter. "I paid for 3 different rehab programs. Bailed him out of jail twice. Let him live with me until he stole everything I had and disappeared for 6 months. She met Thomas's eyes. "My mother died thinking I'd abandoned him. She never knew he'd stolen her jewelry to buy drugs. I let her think I was the selfish one. Clara. So no, Thomas. I don't need you to swoop in and save me. I don't need your money or your pity or your guilt over your father. I just need—" Her voice broke. "I need to have enough. Just once, I need to have enough." Thomas reached across the table slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he covered her hand with his. His palm was warm, steady, real. "You are enough," he said. "You've always been enough. Your brother's addiction isn't a reflection of you. Your mother's death isn't your fault. And the fact that you keep showing up, keep being kind, keep fighting, that's not weakness, Clara. That's strength. I don't feel strong. The strongest people never do." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "My father told me once that real strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting back up when everything in you wants to stay down." He paused. "You get up every day. You work a job you hate to pay off debts that aren't yours. You help dying strangers in the rain. If that's not strength, I don't know what is." Clara wanted to argue, to push him away, to protect herself from the terrifying vulnerability of being seen. But she was so tired of fighting. Tired of pretending she had it all together. Tired of being alone. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of what?" "That if I let you help, if I let you in, you'll realize I'm not worth it. That I'm just some waitress with a mess of a life and nothing to offer. Thomas's grip tightened. Clara, look at me. She did. You showed my father kindness when he was dying. You challenge me to be better. You make me laugh. You remind me what it feels like to be human. His voice was rough with emotion. You've given me more in 3 weeks than I've had in years. So don't you dare tell me you're not worth it. The tears came then, hot and helpless. Thomas moved to her side of the booth and pulled her into his arms. She buried her face in his expensive suit and cried for her mother, her brother, her exhaustion, her fear. He held her through all of it, one hand cradling the back of her head, the other wrapped around her waist. I've got you, he murmured. I've got you. And for the first time in 3 years, Clara believed that maybe, just maybe, she didn't have to carry everything alone. 6 months later, Clara stood in front of a building she didn't recognize. It was small, brick, with wide windows that let in streams of autumn sunlight. A sign hung above the door, the paint still fresh, Thomas Whitmore Sr. Community Center. Thomas stood beside her, nervous in a way she'd never seen him. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining with the easy familiarity of people who'd learned each other's rhythms. Are you sure about this? He asked for the 10th time that morning. Clara squeezed his hand. I'm sure. They'd spent the last 6 months building something neither of them had planned. Thomas had stepped back from the day-to-day operations of Whitmore Technologies, appointing a CEO he actually trusted while he focused on what his father had always wanted, making a real difference. Clara had quit Rosie's Diner after Thomas offered her a job she'd actually wanted, running the community center's outreach programs. It's not charity, he'd insisted when she'd initially refused. You're the most qualified person I know. You've lived it. You understand what people need. She'd taken the job. Not because she needed saving, but because she wanted to help save others. The center offered addiction counseling, job training, hot meals, and a safe place for people to rebuild their lives. It was everything Clara wished had existed for Julian. Everything her mother had deserved. Julian had shown up 2 months ago, gaunt and desperate, begging for money. Clara had given him something better, an ultimatum and a bed in the center's residential program. He was 43 days sober now. Some days were harder than others, but he was trying. That was enough. Ready? Thomas asked, gesturing to the door. Inside, the center was packed. Families clustered around tables in the community kitchen. A job counselor worked with a group of men in donated suits, practicing interviews. In the corner, a small library offered books and computers. And in the back, Clara could see the addiction support group meeting. Julian sat in the circle, his head bowed, listening. Old Pete from the diner was there too, volunteering in the kitchen. Tommy had donated industrial equipment. Even the Henderson twins showed up weekly to teach a financial literacy class that somehow devolved into arguments about crossword puzzles. Miss Hayes. A young woman approached, holding the hand of a little girl with bright eyes. I just wanted to thank you. The job placement program helped me find work, and now. She gestured around. Now we have a chance. Clara's throat tightened. That's what we're here for. As the woman walked away, Thomas pulled Clara close, pressing a kiss to her temple. My father would have loved this. I wish I could have known him better. You did. Thomas's voice was soft. Every time you show someone kindness, every time you see people instead of walking past them, that's him. That's what he tried to teach me my whole life. And you learned it in 20 minutes. Clara turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd walked into her diner 6 months ago, broken and searching. He was different now, softer around the edges, quicker to smile, slower to reduce people to transactions. She liked to think she was different too. Less afraid, more open, willing to believe she deserved good things. I love you, Thomas said suddenly. I should have said it weeks ago, but I was scared. I'm still scared, actually. But I'm more scared of not saying it. Clara's heart stuttered. You're such a work in progress. Is that a yes? That's an, I love you too, you ridiculous man. She pulled him down, kissing him with 6 months of pent-up emotion. He tasted like coffee and hope and new beginnings. When they broke apart, Clara noticed Julian watching from across the room. He nodded once, approval, or maybe just acknowledgement. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. Here's the real question: when life gives you a second chance, do you take it? Or do you let fear keep you stuck? Drop your answer below, because sometimes, your story might help someone else find their courage. That evening, Clara and Thomas walked through the town square where everything had changed. The rain had returned, gentle this time, cleansing rather than punishing. They didn't run from it. Do you ever think about that night? Clara asked. What would have happened if I just walked past your father? Every day. Thomas pulled her closer beneath the umbrella they shared. One act of kindness changed everything. For him, for me, for you. For everyone in that center. Your father was right, you know. About not letting the world make me less kind. He was right about a lot of things. Thomas smiled. Took me too long to figure that out. They stood there in the rain, two broken people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful. Clara thought about her mother, about Thomas Sr., about all the people who'd loved them and left too soon. She hoped they could see this, the community center, the second chances, the love that had grown from grief. Thank you, Clara whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to Thomas, his father, her mother, or the universe itself. Thomas kissed her again, and the rain fell like a blessing. One act of kindness had changed everything. And they were just getting started. The end. If this story touched your heart, imagine how many lives could be changed by one small act of compassion. What's one kind thing you could do today? Share your commitment below. You never know whose life you might change.